backgrounds can be very proud of the part they have played in anti-fascist and anti-racist history locally. One group that is very committed to recording and conveying the Bengali history later is the Swadhinata Trust, and we're very well pleased to welcome their chair, Julie Begum.
Hello everybody. Thank you to David and the Cable Street Organising Committee for putting together this brilliant programme of events to mark the anniversary of the Battle of Cable Street. Well done everybody. A round of applause to David and the Organising Committee. And it's wonderful to see you here today. Now I was asked to say what Cable Street means to me personally. And Cable Street is a local legend. The battle took place on Sunday the 4th of October in 1936 in East London. And it was a clash between the Metropolitan Police protecting the march by members of the British Union of Fascists led by Oswald Mosley and various anti-fascist demonstrators, including local Jewish, Irish, socialist and anarchist communist groups. And I have been inspired by this event and its legacy in my own activism. Now, racism was a part of my life growing up in Tower Hamlets, and I was a child when Alta Valley was murdered in this park, which is named after him. The Bengali community, along with many others from the local community, came together to say enough is enough and stood up against racial violence against the Bengali community in the 1970s. That was a turning point for the Bengali community, who had suffered for countless years, living in terror at the hands of racists who caused fear and violence in this local area. The National Front were bold enough to sell their papers at the top of Brick Lane and were finally moved on after counter demonstrations by the anti-racists and anti-fascists. Thousands marched from this park to Downing Street with Alta Valley's coffin to protest against the racist violence and had a rally at Hyde Park. Last year, I wrote and co-produced a play called The Alta Valley Story to dramatise the ways life had affected people on a personal level. I wanted to humanise the event so that new and existing audiences could feel and relate to the loss in a personal way that it affected his mother and friend in a very real way. These are and were real people whose lives were damaged by racism. Like David said, I am the chair of the Swadhinata Trust, and we promote Bengali culture and heritage to a new and existing audiences so that everyone can know how Bengali people have contributed to British life and society in UK and beyond. The 1970s weren't the only time that the Bengali community were under threat from racism in Tower Hamlets. In the 1990s, the British National Party started beating up and was attacking young Bengali men, like Qudus Ali, who ended up in hospital in a coma with brain damage and left him crippled. His attackers were never brought to justice. Derek Begum was elected as a local councillor, and after a period of intimidation where racists prevented local people from going to polling stations to vote, women in the local area were outraged and came together to form Women Unite Against Racism. We were fed up at the way that we were either being excluded from the anti-racist movement or when we joined protests or demos were being harassed. We wanted a space for women to engage with the campaign in our own terms, and we held meetings and events that were child-friendly and at times and places where local women could attend. We were not party political, and we worked across the movement. We learned from previous civil rights movements in the States and concentrated on getting people registered to vote, printed thousands of leaflets to get as many people to vote in the forthcoming elections, and provided practical escorts to polling stations which helped to defeat and eradicate the British National Party from our local election. We made sure we didn't have the cult of leadership in our own action group like so many male-led organisations, and rotated women speakers from Black and Asian backgrounds so that women were not just silent victims of racism. So what does Battle of Cable Street mean to me today? It means not to be complacent. We shouldn't be sharing platforms with terrorists or extremists, and we need to work together to fight threats to secular and atheist writers and bloggers in Bangladesh and in Britain who are being threatened by extremists. There are lists against people who have been threatened for speaking their minds. Last bit. Okay. The women from Unite Against Racism came together from different backgrounds, and I don't agree that we have to include everybody. It's time we have to realise that we can't get into bed with extremists. and not unless we're willing to pay the consequences for creating an unjust society. We need to stand up and keep the legacy alive for Cable Street. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Jamie. One of the privileges of being on this side is that I can see all the sealed banners